Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Gustafson, and today I'm going to be presenting the topic of can parasites actually kill their hosts? Very quickly, I'm going to go over everything that we'll be covering in this presentation. I will be taking you through the background of parasites, looking at three very specific behaviors of parasites, and an example of each one. And based off of all this, we will be coming to our own conclusion at the very end. So, going over the background really quickly. Parasites are defined as organisms that either live inside or outside the host and benefit by stealing nutrients and gaining their nutrients at the expense of the host that they choose. Parasites either will offer a negligible benefit to the host or no benefit at all, and have a few other specificities to them, such as being dependent on the host for one or more requirements through their life cycle, meaning that they actually have a small amount of independence outside of the host, and that they can have multiple hosts. This can either mean that the individual organism can have multiple hosts through its life cycle, or that one species can parasitize multiple other species. Parasitism, however, is just a relationship where one organism benefits at the expense and cost of the other, and this may seem like the same thing, but it's a bit more broad, and we'll get into where that plays in later and the differences between that. Um, However, really quickly, let's go over the three main branches of parasites, which are the protozoa or single-celled parasites, helminths, which are just worms, and ectoparasites, which live on the host and steal nutrients from the host. And continuing on with the background, parasites will generally not kill their hosts, and if we think about this, this makes sense from a logical perspective. Without the host, the parasite could not continue to live and gain nutrients, so by destroying the host, it would actually be losing those nutrients. So parasites will generally not go out of their way to kill their hosts, and going even further, experts have actually estimated that anywhere from 30 to 50% of all species on Earth can technically be considered parasitic in nature. For us today, however, we will be specifically focusing on three main types or behaviors of parasites, which will be the parasites that do not kill their hosts, parasites that castrate their hosts, and parasites that intentionally and directly lead to the death of the host. We will also mainly be focusing on helminths and ectoparasites through this presentation and the examples I give. So the first behavior that we'll be looking at is parasites that don't kill their hosts. Most parasites will actually fall into this category, and like we said earlier, this makes sense. They can continue to gain nutrients as the host lives along with them, and killing the host would actually destroy said nutrients. And because this is the most popular faction of parasites, they have very common parasites such as ticks and hookworms and fleas included in that. However, the specific parasite we'll be going over in our example is the Cymothoa exigua, which belongs to the Cymothoidae family and the Isopoda order. These will actually enter the fish through the gills as larvae and attach the base of the tongue, or what can be considered the tongue, because fish don't have true tongues. The funny thing about them is that all of the Cymothoas will actually begin as males but change to females after they attach to the base of the tongue, meaning that any other males who try to enter the same fish will remain as males. This female, however, will suck the blood from the fish from the base of the tongue, eventually shriveling up the tongue and becoming the biological equivalent of what the tongue was. And ironically enough, this actually seems to affect the fish's ability to breathe more than it does its ability to eat. And this makes sense because the actual isopod is directly in the way of where the water comes in through the gills, and other males who will try to mate with the female will actually sit in the gills of the fish. So one fish can actually have multiple different males sitting in its gills, also blocking its ability to breathe. This said, however, fish often outlive the parasite in and of itself. The second behavior that we're going to be going over is parasites that actually castrate their hosts. This is a much less popular behavior, and as the name suggests, this behavior will eventually lead to the castration or effective sterilization of the host. And this can actually be done through either behavior modification or through diversion of energy away from the reproductive organs. And this actual behavior seems to be an evolutionary response to the trade off between consumption and longevity that all parasites end up facing. A few examples of parasites like this are Anolasma, Sphaerularia bombi, and Hydrichthys. However, the type we will be focusing on today is rhizocephalan barnacles. These are a superorder of the Arthropoda phylum and have two main parts. The interna, which is the root-like structure highlighted in green, and the externa, which is the large part highlighted in orange. So rhizocephalan barnacles will often parasitize crustaceans such as crabs or lobsters, and the female larva will infect the host by attaching to sensory hairs along the carapace of the host, which is the point where the carapace is actually at the weakest. So the larva is able to inject its cells into the carapace of the host and begin to form the externa, which takes the spot of the crab's brood pouch, which can be considered the equivalent of the womb of the female. And as the interna or the root-like structure actually spreads up and throughout the body of the crab, it will drain the nutrients from the crab and eventually lead to the shriveling of the reproductive organs, leaving the crab effectively sterilized. Not only does it act as roots to actually gain nutrients, but these roots seem to also hijack the behavior of the crab to the point where the crab will actually behave as if the externa is its own brood pouch. Moving on, however, we'll be covering the last behavior, which is parasites that do kill their hosts. Really quickly, this can be a little bit confusing because some are technically classified as parasitoids, and while parasitoids do subscribe to parasitism, they are technically different than parasites. Some of the more specific differences between them is that the young often develop in the host and lead to the direct death of the host. The other difference between parasitoids and parasites is that parasitoids are also extremely highly specific, meaning that they will only parasitize a single or very small amount of other species. This doesn't mean, however, that parasites can't kill their hosts, because some parasites do. These parasites are often parasites that will infect multiple organisms through its life cycle and will lead to the death of the host in an effort to infect another more definitive host. And this can be done by either crippling the first host, modifying its behavior, or through aggressive mimicry, which is the process of changing the host to look like another animal in an effort to get it eaten by its more definitive host. So a couple of examples we can look at both sides. On the parasitoid example, we have a horsehair worm emerging from a cricket and an emerald jewel wasp that emerges from a cockroach. And on the parasite example, we have a snail that is infected by a leucochloridian worm, which causes its eyes to look like caterpillars, leading to the infection of a bird that eats the snail. And a frog, which is crippled by the Ribera ondatrae worm, and will eventually lead to the frog's consumption and will lead to the Ribera's infection of the bird. However, the organism we will be looking at is the emerald jewel wasp, which belongs to the Hymenoptera order and the Ampulicidae family. These parasitize cockroaches, and the female will sting the cockroach twice. The first one is to the thorax in an effort to both paralyze and inject the eggs of the wasp. And after the paralysis has taken effect, the wasp will actually mount the roach and sting a very precise spot in the ganglia of the cockroach. After this, the wasp will regain some energy by eating some of the legs of the cockroach and one of the antennae of the cockroach. After that, it will lead the cockroach into a crevice or burrow and bury the cockroach alive, as the cockroach continues to be eaten from the inside out by the larva of the wasp until the larva eventually matures and bursts out of the cockroach. So the weird thing about this is that it affects its host in two specific ways: through behavioral modification, and this is from the second sting that actually includes a venom that has GABA in it. And GABA is an amino acid that actually acts as an inhibitory and this is an amino acid that basically inhibits the action potential of nerves or neurons. And this actually means that the cockroach actually is still able to feel and sense everything around it, but has lost all inhibition to actually move and is no longer able to move on its own free accord. The second way that they will also affect their host is by crippling the host, um, and this is by eating some of the legs and the antenna of the cockroach, basically leaving the cockroach as nothing but an empty shell to eventually be eaten by its larva. So, the conclusion of the matter: can parasites kill their hosts? Yes, they can, but they often will not. And we looked at three main parasitic behaviors: the parasites that will not kill their hosts, and the example we looked at is Cymothoa exigua. The castration of the host, we looked at the example rhizocephalan barnacles, and parasites that do kill their hosts. And we clarified the example between parasitoids and parasites. And the example we looked at is the emerald jewel wasp. So, again, in conclusion, yes, parasites can kill their hosts, but often will not. I hope that this topic and presentation has been enlightening, that you've been able to learn something more about this. As we delve into this, as we went through this, I hope we were able to learn more and more about the world around us and about the different ways that animals and organisms have evolved in an effort to continue to grow and find nutrients. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If there are any questions, be sure to leave them and I will get to them as soon as possible. My name is Matthew Gustafson, and thank you for listening.